Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this podcast, Zack Schoppen is joining me to talk about his book, The Midwizard of Cosconia. And I hope I pronounced that right, because I forgot to ask the pronunciation before we started.
That's okay. It's a teensy bit different. So I'm Zack Schoppen, author of the Midwizard of Cosconia. So that's how I pronounce it. And fun fact, that is derived from Cusco. That is where I kind of got the idea for that name, Cusco, Peru, which is like, I lived there for a couple months and took my wife back there last year. It's one of my favorite places on earth. So I'm an OBGYN, and I have identified over the many, many years that I've read fantasy for that even though I see pregnant people in the real world every day, I have almost never in any fantasy movies or novels really seen any accurate representations of pregnancy, labor, and delivery. And so I decided it was time to change that.
Wow, that's quite a mission. I did have one fantasy book where she was pregnant, but like I myself have never had kids, and I was like, maybe we should not get into a thing that I have literally no experience with. And I asked my mom, I was like, could you, if I wrote it, would you? She's like, no, just skip it.
Yeah, and I get that. And I have also admittedly never been pregnant or had children myself. But it is something I see from a clinical perspective every day, but also like a personal perspective. Like, you know, when you're an OBGYN, you have so many friends and family members who like you walk through their pregnancy journeys with them. Right. And so like, it's a fun thing that I've gotten to be a part of in so many people's lives. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit more. I mean, it's very true in our culture in general that women are not super well represented a lot of the times, but absolutely in fantasy literature, which was traditionally kind of a boys' club for many years, but really that genre has shifted. And I felt like this part hadn't caught up to that yet.
Oh, wow. You're right. Like, I'm trying to think of, I think the only one that comes to mind is like the Wheel of Time. Like, I remember at the very beginning of the first book, I think she's pregnant and she has the kid on like Dragon Mound or something. I don't remember anything else about the Wheel of Time, but that stuck with me. So I think you're right. I really can't think of anything else that has that. So.
Yeah, like Lord of the Rings famously has, you know, like 3 female characters in it with a total speaking time of like a couple of minutes. And the movies run about 10 hours, which is like crazy and also not that surprising, unfortunately.
In the books, they do like Galadriel has a lot more to say.
Yeah,
it's true. Not in the movie, but in the books, there's a lot more, and they like basically revere her. She's kind of scary in the books,
right? As they should, though.
In a good way, though. Like you know, she's like a force for good, but she's been scary, powerful.
Yeah. So one of the favorite parts about my book and my universe, and I know we're going to do an excerpt, but I want to jump into this real quick, is so like this land of Cosconia, so it has 12 races in it, and kind of like you'll hear over the conversation what all 12 of them are. Elves are one of them. And really what I wanted to do was like create almost a stereotypical fantasy universe. So it's like, you could walk into a bar in Middle Earth or in Narnia or whatever, and it's just kind of this like standard fantasy universe, but there's actual pregnancy and babies like any universe should have. And so like my elves have a lot of nods to Lord of the Rings, and like you'll see a very like classic fantasy representations of a lot of these races, like orcs and halflings pop up.
Oh, wow. So, that's cool though, that I can't think of any book that has like the different magical races having kids, not just wow, that's pretty neat. Do you want to talk? Go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump into the excerpt here.
Well, I think, should you do the blurb first? Do we get a better idea of like who, or do you want to do that after the excerpt? I don't know it's your book, baby. You know your book, baby, best.
Yes, I think blurb is a great idea. Because that definitely sums it up, and I really like our blurb. I do have like a bit of a trigger warning that I have at the beginning.
Let's do that first, then. Yeah, let's get that out of the way.
It's a little lengthy, but for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to read it right from my book here because it really gets into it. So first off, I want to, I'd like to thank all the readers who pick up this book. I've had this idea percolating in my head for years, and it's now a reality. So as an OBGYN and a fantasy lover, this concept combines two of the things I love the most in life. But this book also has some really heavy stuff in it, like seriously heavy stuff. Infertility, miscarriage, preeclampsia, poor pregnancy outcomes, and maternal and fetal mortality. Even though these things happen to elves and orcs and changelings, it still might be triggering, especially for anybody who's experienced trauma related to pregnancy. To you, from the bottom of my heart, I see you. Well, of course, I've never personally been infertile or had a miscarriage or lost a child. I've supported countless people dealing with extremely difficult pregnancy and delivery-related problems. I've cried with patients. I've sobbed in my car after work. Some of those bad outcomes sit with me for months or years. I've seen the most beautiful, joyous moments in a family's life, and I've seen the worst. Nobody knows your trauma like you do, but as much as any man can, I understand it. You have pregnancy trauma, and reading about depictions of pregnancy complications seems like it would be too hard. I understand if this book isn't for you. But pregnancy trauma is all too common, and we don't talk about it nearly enough. Did you know that nearly 20% of pregnancies end in miscarriage? And that 5% of pregnancies are complicated by preeclampsia? Or that postpartum hemorrhage is the leading cause of maternal mortality worldwide? I hope this book brings awareness to some of the issues women in our world face, but don't feel like they can talk about. Pregnancy gets so little representation in society, and this book aims to change that. Plus, I promise if you keep reading, it will pay off. While pregnancy, labor, and delivery are nowhere near as dangerous in our world as in Cosconia, and this book is not meant to be an allegory of the real world in any way, there are many similarities that bleed through. Pregnancy is wonderful and beautiful, but can also be dangerous and scary, especially for people of color. Maternal morbidity and mortality, aka women who have bad outcomes or die during the pregnancy, delivery, or postpartum process, in the United States is unacceptably high. I see the consequences of this every day. It places an undue burden on patients, their families, and the healthcare workers who care about them. Please consider donating to an organization that is committed to improving women's health in your area. For all of 2025, I will be donating 100% of proceeds to Cherry Health and Sojourner House, two excellent organizations committed to helping women. Finally, you may be asking, why the hell a dude is writing about pregnant women and having babies? It's a fair question with a simple answer. I love it. Even after a 24-hour shift, I'm excited to go into work the next day. I love obstetrics and gynecology. I love delivering babies. Sometimes I still tear up even thousands of deliveries later. I love talking about birth control. I love making sure women are up to date on all their screening. I love women taking control of their lives by teaming up and screening to help their heavier, painful periods. I love everything about labor and delivery, and this was the best way I knew how to share it with the world. I want to be the biggest male advocate for women's health. Women have had their voices silenced for too long, and I hope I can use my voice to amplify theirs. I hope this opens up a door for writers, male and female, to explore some of the more uncharted concepts in the fantasy world like I have.
Wow.
Yeah, so a little bit lengthy, but I think very necessary. There's a reason I have the Kindle automatically open up to this page because I want everyone to read it.
No, it's really cool. I didn't know that you're donating. That's very generous. And
yeah, and cool. The book's priced at 99 cents. Like I don't think this is gonna change the world, but I like you said, this is not something as an indie author I'm necessarily doing to support myself, and so it's the literal least I could do in my mind.
And it's cool that you are doing that because you could have just been like you could have not done that, and I still think even if you weren't donating it, just the fact that you're advocating and shining a light on it is still it's really important. Like you said, women's health is, there's a lot more that could be, I am a woman.
We have experienced, get into that.
Yeah. Have experienced that. It's not always, let's go to that excerpt.
Yes. All right. So I'm just going to read a little bit from chapter 1 here. Chapter 1 is called A Giant Problem. All right. It takes place 50 years before the 12 Race War. Push! Izzie screamed for what felt like the 100th time that day. The baby giant's head had been crowning for at least 6 hours, and the midwizard was starting to get worried this baby wasn't coming. She knew this was a potential complication, but it was the first time she'd actually seen it in real life. The textbooks and simulations couldn't prepare you for the real thing. This baby wasn't coming out. She could feel it in her gut. It wasn't unusual for a giantess to labor for weeks and push for upwards of an entire day, but the 24-hour mark had just passed with no end in sight. Izzie tried to envision what her professor had taught her about giantess pregnancy complications in midwizardry school. Size is the giant's greatest asset and their biggest downfall, Professor Vilt had lectured. The average giantess, who is typically taller than her partner, is 25 feet tall. Of the many types of giants, rock giants, frost giants, and even the fabled fire giants, the rock giants are the smallest in stature. This lecture is a giant pain in my ass, Dolpha whispered to Izzie. Shh, Izzie stifled a giggle and shushed her best friend, playfully smacking her under the desk. This is going to be on the text. Izzie knew the mind majored AC exam no matter what, but Izzie was naturally book smart. After a gestation of nearly 2 years, Professor Vilt continued, a giant baby, pardon the oxymoron, will usually weigh around 60 pounds. The entire class gasped at this. The giants were only the second race they had covered so far in midwizardry school, yet after starting with the dwarves and their 3 to 4 pound babies, a 60-pound baby was incomprehensible. They went on to learn that giants would give birth to babies up to 5 feet tall. Damn, Dolpha whispered again. That's lanky as hell. Now Izzie looked up at the sweating giantess. Even though she had cast a spell on herself to increase her own size to help with the delivery, Sadir still towered over the wizard. Sadir, the youngest sister of the giant king of Rotoplas, was considered to be one of the smaller giantesses, clocking in at about 21 feet by Izzie's estimation. Part of being a midwizard was meeting her patients where they were at, which sometimes included physically changing form. Since Izzie was the height of a normal wizard, about 6 feet tall, there was no way she could deliver a baby nearly the same size as her. For this reason, all midwizards were required to learn the spell Corporis Gigatorum, which effectively doubled their size. Sadir, like most rock giants, had rough gray skin. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but Izzie thought her skin looked even grayer right now, like the ash left over after a fire. That wasn't a good sign. Her strong jaw was set with determination, but it was clear the giantess was in pain. Her coarse black hair was plastered against her anguished face. Her breaths were short and gasping, and her typically imposing presence seemed diminished, weak, scared. Her older sister sat by her bedside with a massive hand resting gently on her shoulder. Take a break for a few minutes, Izzie told the giantess. All right, I'm going to stop right there because I want to create a little bit of suspense to know what happens with Sadir.
So she's delivering a lot of babies in this book, would you say?
Yes, definitely. It's hard to say what her count is by the end, but it is probably even higher than mine is. But, she is a wizard and has the advantage of having a lifespan that is significantly longer than mine.
So you said Izzie is a lizard?
A mid-wizard. So it's like a midwife.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like a midwife wizard. So she is her affinity, which is the type of magic that she is a specialist at, is blood magic.
Gotcha.
And so that's what helps her with stopping an orc from hemorrhaging too much. And she is the only blood magician left in the land.
Gotcha. How come, or is that a spoiler? But I was going to say, how come she's the only one left? Like, where does the the magic come from? Like, maybe we should talk about the magic system, because it seems like your system is a bit unique from other systems I've heard about.
It is, but it's still like quite simple. So it's basically like wizards are the only race in the land who are born with an affinity, which is just like the type of magic that they are like naturally inclined towards. They can do other types of magic, but like a beast, someone with a beast affinity is really good at, talking to animals or taming beasts. And somebody with a mind affinity can train themselves to read minds or even potentially other stronger things. And so Izzie has this blood affinity, which makes her adept at performing blood magic. And you'll actually find out she's not very good at other types of magic, like many of our main characters. It's really she's got her one thing, and everything else she struggles at. And then there's kind of the two other aspects of the magic, which is your skill. And that's just practice makes perfect. And so the more you practice, the better you are, the better skilled you are at magic. And then the last is your intent. And that's kind of like a vague combination of situation and, the thought behind the magic. And so that one's like a little bit more nebulous. So those are kind of the three: affinity, skill, and intent.
Okay. Interesting. So where does the magic come from? Or is that a spoiler?
It's really just like it's a fantasy land that there is just magic in the land. So like all wizards are born like with that affinity. No other races are, but the water fae, they have water magic. So like they are just like, that is kind of the one type of magic they can practice. And then something like a changeling who can turn into any race that they physically touch. So if they turn into a wizard or they turn into a water fae, they can practice a little bit of magic. They don't have an affinity, but they can learn enough skill that they can practice the magic still.
Gotcha. So affinity is like a thing you can like learn, you can gain.
It's really like only that's a wizard. That's like the unique trait to their race, kind of.
Okay.
So like that's what would differentiate a wizard from a human. Otherwise, like, you know, they look pretty similar on the outside.
Okay. So how many? All right. So we talked. You've got giants, and you've got all different varieties of giants. What other magical creatures do you have in here?
Yeah. So the 12 would be wizards, giants, orcs, changelings, minotaurs, halflings, humans, elves, blood sprites, and dwarves. I think I said all of them.
What are blood sprites? I've not come across that before.
And that's like a little unique to this book. Most of them are kind of like things you've seen before. So that is not really known to anybody else in the book either. They're a very mysterious race. They're kind of known as the 12th race of Cosconia, because nobody really knows anything about them. So it's interesting that you say that, because that's about how everybody feels.
Does Izzie run into them, or they're just
that I guess you'll have to see if you come across it. It does say in the beginning it's the 12 race war, so you would presume that everybody is represented, but we start the action 50 years before that.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
Yeah, so it takes place over quite a few decades, and it does jump back and forth between the past and the present a little bit. We kind of start like with Izzie's present, which is she's just graduated from midwizardry school, which is where you naturally train to be a midwizard. It is 12 years long, and I purposely made it 12 years long to represent the 12 years of training that I did to become an OBGYN, which would be 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, and 4 years of residency. And so similar to myself, Izzie trained for 12 years. And so that we've got kind of the present, but then we learn a little bit about her past and this guy that she met in the past, and kind of we jump back and forth a little bit as we learn a little bit more what happened in her past as we kind of count down towards the war in the present.
Oh, so there's a war on. What started the war?
So we start 50 years before the war, and like that's really all of the detail that the reader gets. And in the setting, like nobody knows that the war is going to happen. Like only the reader knows that. And you start over the first couple chapters, start just hearing like vague rumors about a war, which is strange because Cosconia has been at peace for centuries. So a war would be very unusual since the Great Divide. So the 12 races of Cosconia used to live in harmony. But at some point, we don't really learn much about this, but we know that there was a Great Divide which split the land like between the 12 races. So really, nobody lives in harmony in this land, and you can see that tensions are starting to brew between them.
Okay. Are we going to get more of that in the next book, or it's a background thing because it doesn't really touch on Izzie? Or are we going to see more of the effects of war?
So we definitely get to the 12 race war in this book. So like that is kind of like the crux. So we're counting down to it. So like already by like the fourth chapter, we're 36 years before the war or something like that. So like we jump forward in time quite a bit because, you know, that is how life works. Is like a lot of our fantasy novels, like they take place over a couple of days or something like that, and things happen so quickly. And, you know, that's not how life works, and it's certainly not how pregnancy works. Pregnancy is long. And so I think the reader can almost feel that, like the passage of time throughout this book. And I think anyone who's ever been pregnant can tell you, yeah, it feels like a long time. It's 9 months, but sometimes it feels like much longer than that.
Oh, wow. That makes sense, though. I mean, not all fantasy books take place on a short time frame. Like there are...
No, definitely not.
Yeah, there are many that are more epic in scope, like The Lord of the Rings, definitely. It's definitely not a few days.
It is not. There's a lot of walking and traveling.
Yes. And poetry and singing. Can't forget
Correct.
that. Tolkien liked his songs. and his epically long poems that they just pause and, and there was looking at the stars also. I mean, they definitely stopped and paused and they weren't constantly on the go.
And he was certainly not concerned about page count. And
no,
I definitely have been a little bit more cognizant of that for my readers' sake.
Yeah. Either, or he thought he would get paid by page. I'm not sure.
Right, that's true. Maybe he got paid like Kindle Unlimited authors get paid.
No, I don't think he did. But I mean, he also he was trying to keep it realistic that they are crossing extremely gigantic distances. So having them show up in the next chapter, to him didn't make any sense. He wanted you to feel that it is a journey. I think that's one of the, even though it's long, the books, I think that's one of its strengths is you really do feel the passage of time in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're going through different landscapes and dealing with different things and running into different people. You get a sense of how big this Middle Earth is and how far away things are. They are not close together. And they are on foot, which you can only walk a certain amount every day.
Yes, that is true. And at one point in my book, they're constructing something that's going to be really, really large and long. They're like, this project's going to take about 24 years. And it does. And you don't see the end of it until 24 years later.
Oh, that's so in that book, about how many years pass? I'm just curious.
From start to finish, about probably 55 or so.
Okay.
Yeah, but it spans a little bit longer because you do see another 30 or 40 years into Izzie's life.
Okay. So how long do wizards live?
They don't really know, upwards of 1,000 years at least. So wizards are a race that doesn't reproduce a considerable amount, and that makes sense. Sometimes nature tends to keep itself in check, and if you had thousands and thousands of wizards in a land, why would they not take over? They're far more powerful than everybody else usually.
Right.
And so, but they do live a very long time, and if you look at wizards throughout, fantasy literature, that's pretty consistent. 50 years would be nothing but a day for them.
Wow. So Izzie is still kind of, if it's after at the end of 50 something years, Izzie's still basically she's still pretty new at the wizard thing, because if she's going to live for thousands of years, she's not considered I guess at what point would she be considered I don't know what the terminology you use, to have finished her it's not a residency because she graduated, whatever comes that period of where you're started working and you're putting into practice all the theories you learned, but so you're still considered junior or whatever. At what point do you switch to that and be the person people go to for that they call in when they need someone, that you become that knowledge holder, that expert, or you've done enough that now you're I don't know I can't find the words today.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. And so her plan when she graduates Midwizardry school is to spend about six years with each of the 12 races. And if my math is correct, that gets you to about 72 years. And so war does have a tendency to derail plans, and so I'll leave it at that. But that would be the intention. But sometimes it is in times of war or in times of conflict that people become the strongest, and it does push you to your limits.
What does she plan? I guess she doesn't know what she wants to do after those 72 years. I guess that's her interning with all the different races. Is she going to pick one she likes and stick with it?
So she wants to be a generalist, and that's what I am in the OBGYN world. I do a little bit of everything. I do pregnancy care and postpartum care, and I do labor and delivery and C-sections, but I also do a lot of hysterectomies and removal of ovarian masses, or sometimes gender affirming surgery or that kind of care, and I do menopause care. So I do a little bit of everything. That's exactly what Izzie's like. She's kind of a generalist. She wants to be able to do everything and see everything, kind of be the one to go to.
I see. So then she could be with her patients throughout their whole life, and really they could keep coming back to her.
Exactly.
Yeah, because she does everything. That's
Yeah, which is, that's the cool part of being in the OBGYN world is like you do see like from the start of life, like you're there for delivery, but like we also take care of patients that have ovarian cancer, cervical cancer. And so like we see the whole lifespan, and it's a really cool thing to be able to walk with patients like through, the best moments of their lives, like a childbirth and like some of the most difficult. And that's a tough part of the job, but it's easily the most rewarding.
Oh, wow. So is there a lot of you and Izzie?
I would say that as far as our careers, yes. Our personalities, not necessarily. I would say that we are pretty different in that. She is kind of, haunted by her past and a little bit tortured, and our goals are a little bit different. So like we ended up in the same career through very, very different paths.
So what is she haunted by? Or is that a spoiler?
You kind of see that building as it goes, and so you just kind of get like flashes of it here and there. You're like, okay, there's like something deeper at play here, and eventually you do dive into it a little bit more.
Okay, and what were her reasons for getting into it, or is that?
And that's a great question. So that's what you figure out, and you kind of ask yourself as you go. You're like, like why did she become a midwizard? Like, the more you learn about her past, the more you're like, I don't know if I see this career choice for her. But then slowly you really get into it, and it makes sense how she ended up there at the end of the day.
And she doesn't regret the decision, it sounds like.
Yeah, some of her decisions definitely have some serious fallout, but she usually is at least willing to own up to them.
Okay, so all right, so why did you get into it? We know, so we have to wait and read the book, but you're not in the book, so we can ask you.
That's true. So there's no spoilers there.
Or is there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I kind of like med school was from pretty early on kind of the direction I was headed, but I always wanted to be a pediatrician. I love working with kids, and I just felt like that was my calling. And when I got into medical school, I did my OBGYN rotation. And I will admit, like, as kind of like a sheltered middle class male, I was like not really exposed to women's health at all. And like, I got into my OBGYN rotation in med school, and I was like, wow, women are sometimes treated like second-class citizens in our world. And unfortunately, I wish I could say that's gotten better, but I feel like it's unfortunately gotten worse. And so I kind of saw that, and I remember my first C-section that I ever saw was like an emergency for triplets, and like they pull 3 babies out of there. I'm like, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I did a birth control counseling session, and I was like, why was that so fun for me? Like, I didn't think talking about contraception would be just like enjoyable for me, and like landing on something that was going to work for a patient. And so, then I did my pediatrics rotation, and I enjoyed it, but like, I felt like in women's health, I just got to see the full spectrum of care so much more. And so I kind of like made that decision, and oh man, am I glad I did. Like, it was absolutely the right decision for me. Even after like a 24-hour shift, I'm like still excited to go in the next day. I love it. It's crazy. And I like this past week, I barely slept at all, and it was a rough week, but like, it's worth it. And I have done some really cool things. And so I am so happy with the decision I made.
Oh, that's great. And it sounds like your patients lucked out as well, because you're aware of the issues in women's health, and that makes you more sensitive to them and to hearing about their complaints and advocating when you can. So that sounds like a win on both sides.
Yeah. And I think the thing I hear the most from my patients, which like makes me sad for the state of our healthcare system sometimes, is they're like, this is the first time I've had a doctor who I felt like listened to me. And that seems to me like the simplest thing you could do is just like shut up and listen. But unfortunately, that seems to be one of the rarer things that people find in our healthcare system. And so I lament that is the case. And like, I hope that is what my generation of healthcare workers continues to do, which is just listen.
Are you going to create any more characters in her world? Like, will there be a version of you in there at some point?
One thing I've thought about. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I am someone who struggles with chronic pain myself, and it's something that ebbs and flows. But I've spent a lot of time at the doctor inside and outside of work, and so I haven't inserted that kind of character into the book yet, but it is something I want to represent because that's also something that's extremely common in our world. Like low back pain is the number one reason for a visit to your primary care doctor. What I learned in medical school. And I see so many patients with chronic pelvic pain and endometriosis, and that is something that is severely and underrepresented in our world. So I think I want to have a character in the future that kind of represents that. And so it will not be hard for me to write since that is something I've got some personal experience with.
And that's stigmatized too, like people being in chronic pain and
totally
getting in a diagnosis for endometriosis is like, I mean, I know someone who's in her 40s who only finally got a diagnosis for it. And she was like, finally an explanation for all the things.
Right. Not even necessarily a treatment, unfortunately. People are happy for just an explanation. And that's how bad it can be sometimes.
Yeah. I don't remember Serena or Venus Williams. One of them I was reading recently, that she had been in severe pain from her periods. And it was, I think it was like fibroids, but it took her she's like till 2024 or something to finally get a doctor to listen and a proper diagnosis. And it was something that was fixable, they could go in and remove those and that would her body was telling her there's a problem and she just couldn't get anybody to take her seriously. And reading that was gut wrenching, but I get it because I am a woman and I have been in the situation where you're telling them there's a problem and they're like, nah, it's just women's issues and there's nothing wrong. This is the way it's supposed to be. Just move along. Let me deal with other people. And I know it's much worse for people who are of color or of different ethnic backgrounds. Her story really touched me. It was like, and here she is famous with money and stuff, and she can't get the proper care. That was eye-opening.
And she actually almost died during her pregnancy. It was one of the Williams sisters, and I'm forgetting which one as well. But I that is this famous person, a recognizable household name, and still that is the state of our maternal healthcare system in the United States. And it's something I am on the front lines of. And thankfully I live in a city and I work at a hospital system where I have really good resources. And there's a lot of good physicians around us. I live in Grand Rapids. And so we work at kind of a huge hospital there. Okay. But in rural areas, especially lately, as they lose funding dollars, it just is, it's tough and it's scary.
Yeah, that was scary reading that. How could someone who has so much not be able to get the proper care? That was just I couldn't stop reading the story. And at the same time, I was both horrified and I'm so glad that she was finally able to get help. Yeah,
seriously.
But then it makes you think about all women out there who can't get help for maybe because there aren't doctors or their doctors don't listen. And I don't want to blame doctors because they may not be listening because they're just worn out and exhausted and they just don't have the ability to, because there's a lot of different things that have the same exact symptoms and you have to go through and figure it out. And if they're exhausted and overworked and have too many patients and they just can't, dig into that to figure out what's going on because they just don't have anything left. So it's a problem on both sides. I don't want to blame doctors because I agree. I follow a number of doctor influencers who talk about this, like Dr. Glockenfleck and Dr. Mike, and they're always talking about this, how broken our system is on both sides.
And we get 15 minutes to meet this new person and examine them and learn all about the pain that they've had for 15 years. And that in no universe can you fit all of that in. So it's really frustrating and you feel like we're not listening and we are, but I want to listen to the 30 people I have to see in a day. but that's impossible. Like that,
Yeah.
that's sometimes impossible. And I wish the system didn't do that to us. It is unfair.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that like perspective into it. So I'm not like just blaming doctors. They understand.
Yes, of course.
Like, and it doesn't help that like, because like many doctors, like, they can't, because they're seeing so many patients, they can't stay open later. So often like we're going to like urgent care centers when we don't feel well because we can't go to our doctor.
Right.
We couldn't get time off from work. The urgent care center is open after work. So I feel like those doctors, the doctors, they're all wonderful doctors, but I feel for them too, that they're seeing people who should be going to their primary care doctors. Because I've had them tell me that, like, you really should be going to your primary care doctor this. And I was like, well, unfortunately, I couldn't get an appointment there working.
Yes,
so
exactly.
You need to help. I'm talking to you now. And they're all been really wonderful. But I also want to acknowledge that too, that it's difficult to get consistent care, that your primary care doctor may only be seeing pieces of what's going on, because in between, when you're not well and you can't get an appointment, you're running to an urgent care, which is a different doctor. And I don't know if all their systems connect, if there's any way for your primary care doctor to know that you were there. And you may forget to tell them, so they're not seeing so it can be, I can see how that
kind
can
of a
be very
vicious
challenging.
cycle sometimes.
Yeah.
Luckily, Izzie is, since she's a wizard, they don't always have to sleep like the rest of us do. And so sometimes she has good work-life balance, but sometimes maybe out of guilt from what she feels like she's done in the past, she will work night and day and forego sleep and forego eating to provide care, which isn't healthy either. And you can't save all the people all the time, unfortunately. And Izzie struggles to accept that sometimes, especially when she feels like maybe she needs to make up for decisions she's made in the past. And she also fears burnout. It looks a little bit different for a wizard, and we kind of discover what that means. But burnout is also something that can happen to her, but it is a little more dangerous for her.
I'm wondering what burnout would look at in my fantasy world. I'm going to have to think about that.
Yeah, exactly. And the reader doesn't necessarily find out. Izzie just says, I got to be careful or I'll avoid burnout. You're kind of left asking the question, like, what does that look like?
I mean, I guess like one of the things which I think would be terrifying to someone who depends on their power is like, if you use too much and you just don't have any at the moment and you need it, like that could be, I could see that for somebody like Izzie, whose magic is very helpful and that they're using to save people's lives. That could be terrifying, that you're in a situation where you need it and you've used so much of it that you don't have the magic that you need to help them. So I could see her rationing it in that regard. I'm not saying that that's definitely what it is.
Is that not exactly how burnout works in our world? That you do too much of what you're good at and eventually you can't do it anymore.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's pretty neat. So let's go back to this maternal magic thing. Cause is it like, what is that exactly? Like, because your blurb says question? It protected every mother and child. Like,
yeah, and that is kind of the question. So we don't really know. And It's kind of the most poorly understood school of magic. We know that there is this concept of maternal magic in Cosconia. And Izzie points out at one point that there's some people who don't even believe in the concept of maternal magic. She says it's mostly men who believe that. But here's a quote that Izzie says. So. Sure. Izzie had seen it dozens of times, a strength that transcended known science, a baby pulling through against all odds. She could see it on full display in front of her. And so this is maternal magic. You can't quite explain it, but it's when a giant baby maybe pulls through against all odds, or a dwarf baby isn't born too small, which can happen in Cosconia.
Oh, wow. So it's the least understood, and like probably the least amount of people go into it, it sounds like, as well. So that probably doesn't help. And people not believing in it, like maybe that's part of it. Because that's a big thing in my fantasy setting, is that belief is power. And if you believe, if enough people believe something, they can bring it about, even if none of them have magic, because belief is its own force.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting concept. I do like that a lot. It makes me think of like the movie Elf, like with everyone believing in Santa Claus, and that's what powers his sleigh.
I mean, if you go back and read like the Lord of the Rings like carefully, like there is a thread of belief in there. Like if that's what gets them through, they believe they'll get to Sauron, and they get there because that belief pulls them along. Because some of them like lose hope and whatever, but they still believe in their friendship and everything, and so that gets them through.
True.
They don't know that when they're separated that their friends are alive. They hope that they are, and they've decided that they're going to believe that they are because they don't have any proof that they're not. Even when they're, when Aragorn and them are there, and the mouth of Sauron comes out and taunts them and shows them the mithril shirt and tries to get them to give up all hope. Aragorn's like, I'm not going to believe that they're gone. He says it much more poetically, until I see the proof with my own eyes, because Sauron is a deceiver. So,
True,
and then he rallies them and he's like, let's do this. We don't know. And we're going to keep hoping. And belief feeds into hope, which is also in my fantasy setting. But I also believe it in real life, because if you believe something, and you start seeing signs of it, you start to, that can feed that hope. And the two can just become like that like, they can just feed off each other. And then because you hope and you believe something, like you can actually go and do it. Like you believed you could write this book, and you hoped that you could. Then you started doing it, and that belief, that hope fueled that belief as you started doing it. And then it eventually, like, now it's here and we're talking about it. I don't know if I'm explaining this right.
Yeah, I mean, there are powers in our universe, that we don't understand. I have no doubt in that. There's a reason so many medical people are superstitious, and you're never allowed to say it's quiet around a hospital. We clearly believe in maybe powers beyond our own understanding in our world.
Yeah, and I think when you have a collective of people, like a bunch of people working in, like a lot of doctors in a hospital, if you all start believing the same thing, I do think you can bring things about.
Yeah, unless it's to get us to work less hours, then
I don't know if
all the belief in the world is going to work for that one.
Yeah, no, that's bucking up against like corporate interests, and I don't know about that, but going back to the maternal magic, and I think we were starting to talk about it's poorly understood. In Izzie's class, like I'm guessing there's not a lot of people in it. What happened to her classmates? Did they go off and do other things? Was she the only one studying it? Were they like a general magic school and she did like a maternal magic rotation? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so you get into it a little bit. Like maternal magic, that's not like an affinity you can have, like a blood affinity or a space affinity or whatever. So like it really is just like this like ethereal concept. And Izzie goes to midwizardry school, which is separate. Everyone does their basic magical training, but she makes a decision to go to this kind of long midwizardry school, which we get a few flashes of. I can see myself in the future maybe doing like a prequel novella of Izzie in school. I felt like I wanted to get away from the school trope a little bit. I love magic school, don't get me wrong, it's one of my favorite tropes, but I didn't have it in me to write that, and it also is hard to have a bunch of babies delivered in school, but I might explore it more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, they could have been focusing on other things, because I guess if someone was poor and didn't have any other options, like a school setting wouldn't be a bad idea, because at least there's going to be an expert there teaching them, so you're at least going to be in safe hands.
That's true.
I could see that. I mean, because we do have teaching hospitals.
Yes, and that's what I do personally. I work with residents, and I am somebody who likes to teach and likes to pass on the knowledge that I have gotten from those before me, and so I enjoy that, and so that's why the setup had to be a little different, because there is no medical schools necessarily in Cosconia, but we get a little bit into that background. And I think as the series goes on, we will learn even more and more about her time in school.
Okay. No, that would be cool.
I was just working on book 2 because I'm about maybe 60% of the way through book 2, and I did a little flashback to her taking a historical pregnancies elective, in which she learned about races that were extinct in Cosconia. Because I felt like maybe in your last year of school, that's kind of a fun elective you would take with your friend.
Yeah, that could be very interesting too, learning about it, like what they believed in the past.
Yeah, I certainly think there's a lot of benefit to us taking medicine, like the history of medicine classes, to learn about some of the good things and unfortunately a lot of the bad things. But if you don't learn from your past, you're doomed to repeat it. So I think that learning from the history of medicine is something that we should all do and something that we should take into account.
Oh, definitely. So now that you brought up book 2, do you have any idea of when it might come out? Is there like a target date, or like, like you just want to get it out by next year, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Since book 1 is out September 7th, which hopefully will be the day after this podcast launches. So I'm hoping for spring 2026 is what I'm aiming for that one. So I don't want to make people wait much more than 7 or 8 months max.
Oh, not 9 months just to be cute.
That actually would be really funny. I'll have to look into if that timing works out. Maybe I'll be able to push it to that. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, that could be kind of like, it just seems like because this is about babies and it takes 9 months, to incubate the baby, that, the book I don't know. If it's done sooner, I wouldn't hold it, obviously, because.
Yeah. But there are some races in the book with shorter pregnancies. And so a halfling pregnancy only lasts 3 months, whereas an elf pregnancy lasts 3 years.
Okay. I mean, 3 months is a good cadence to put out there. Is it going to be a trilogy? Is it an open-ended series?
Yeah, open-ended at this point. I would say a trilogy is what I have planned out at least, but my wife and I just were kind of batting around some ideas for a potential 4th book last night. Nice. So we'll have to see where it goes. That's
really cool. That's cool that it's some authors know when they start writing something. I'm never sure.
How could you? And
trilogies.
I didn't even know where
5 books.
Yeah. Exactly. And then you have the second trilogy. You're like, okay, so you're just still writing that, and that's okay.
Yeah. So now I'm just like, unless I'm totally sure that it's going to only be a trilogy, I'm like, okay, it is what it is. And it is going to be however many books the characters need to accomplish the mission. So
right. Once I start reinventing the wheel and kind of repeating the same plot lines, then it's time to be done.
Yes. Is Cosconia a world? Cosconia? I'm going to get it.
Cosconia, yes.
Cosconia. Okay. Like couscous, Cosconia. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So is that if you run out of plot lines for Izzie, would you pick up with another character and continue writing in that world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's 12 races, so there's a lot of ground to explore there, I think. So I could see that. There's one character in particular, Pike, who I think that people would love and would potentially love to hear more about her. She's a changeling, and so there's a lot of ground there.
Yes. That changelings can be very fun characters to write about.
Yes, I drew a lot of my inspiration for the changeling characters with the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
I'm familiar. I haven't read any of them, but I've seen them. So I'm not into lit RPG video game kind of stories.
That's fair. Yeah.
So I know of it, but I've looked into it, but I'm not sure I would. I think I would enjoy some aspects of it, but I would not enjoy the game stuff. And I don't know if it's one of those very crunchy books with tons of stats and the one.
That's what I like about it is that he kind of he really gets away from that, as I think can appeal to a broader audience. But I like the changelings that can kind of morph into any race that they touch. And it just then they have kind of a fraction of the power of that race, which I think is really fun.
Okay, that's neat. I've seen that in other books. So that's a kind of standard fantasy changeling kind
Agreed,
of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. But having it done right is, I'm not sure all the places I've read it's been done right. Because
you could also make them too powerful.
Well, and also people also shy away from this, but a real changeling, they don't, they don't really have a base form. They don't actually have a gender. And like a lot of people just ignore that fact that when they are changing into things, they're changing to men and women in other races. And they don't actually have any of this. And in some of them, they're taking on like their traits. And like at some point, like, because like everything they're touching them and they're taking on their traits and basically being them for a while. And that's going to leave some kind of impression, I guess. And you do this enough, true, yes. It's like, what is your truth? And like nobody, and I think people avoid this because it plays into like a lot. People like to shy away from anything that has to do with like gender and changing gender and stuff. And so like they do the fun things of the changeling, but they don't explore the psychology of That's like so actually true. Being somebody who has no base form. They don't like, you know what I mean? And if you're constantly changing forms and stuff, do you lose who you are essentially? Because that's things that like I've thought about this a lot because I had a character who is a changeling and I wanted to explore that, but I wasn't really sure how to explore that in a way, especially with what we have now going on in the US and that all the gender and identity stuff being like, at the moment, I guess they're trying to criminalize it, or I don't know. I think that's where we're going. So it's scary to even like dive into any of that. But I feel like that is somewhere that fantasy has been kind of avoiding. I think it's done in fanfics, but I'm not sure. I don't read fanfics. I've never been like enough of a fan of something to want to read a fanfic or invested enough in a ship to want to read fan fiction about it.
Yes, that's fair.
You know, I have my own one in my head and I'm good with that.
Exactly.
But yeah, like that's just not really explored even in like indie fantasy. Like I don't, and I get it. Like that's something that could get you into trouble right now with what's going on. So, and banned.
Yeah, in my book, the people don't always trust the changelings because they're viewed as shifty and not trustworthy. And I'll leave it to the reader to decide if those stereotypes are merited for the changelings in the book. But they do have that reputation.
And I think, and some of it is unjust, but I think some of it is just because we want truth, and anything that obfuscates that we naturally distrust. And a changeling, because they're changing, you don't know what is their truth. If you and I were sitting in a real physical room, you know the truth because, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm not going to change. But if I was a changeling, you'd have no, like, who am I really? You'd have no idea, you know? And
yes.
And I'd always wonder with changelings, like, well, how many people have you changed into? Which obviously that's a rude question you wouldn't ask, but like, what sort of impression has that left? Is the person I'm talking, is that still you? Or like, are you manifesting traits of somebody that you just were 10 minutes ago and you don't realize it? Like, what is the real you, you know?
Yeah, you get a view of that in the book a little bit about kind of like the damage it does to your soul as a changeling when you're constantly kind of splitting yourself.
Yeah, not even just the soul. Like, I think mentally that would be like, I don't know, it like in some fantasy settings and even superhero settings, like you get some of their personality too. And like, how do you keep who you are? You know, I guess you have to have a really strong sense of self to be able to put on and take off like the different personas. And I think that would be really challenging.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm realizing now I have forgotten to talk about pretty much by far everybody's favorite character in the book.
Yes.
Which is not one of the races at all, actually. So it's Izzie's medical bag, who she gives a sentience charm to. But as I mentioned earlier, Izzie's not very good at other types of magic that aren't blood magic. So it goes a little bit awry. And she has a sentient talking bag, but it's kind of a dick. And the way that it talks is a little bit confusing and maybe doesn't always meet normal expectations. And sometimes Izzie is left wondering what the heck it's talking about. And so that is how I inject a lot of humor into an otherwise very heavy topic, because otherwise this book, it might be a little too bleak. And so there was a lot of references and things that like maybe only the reader is going to catch in this. And so that's pretty much by far been everybody's favorite character, is the sassy talking bag.
That's so fun. I like that she has a talking bag. That's interesting. So you've got charms and things. So if you needed some sort of magic that's not something you have an affinity for or that you're any good at doing, you could get a fellow wizard to create you a charm, or do you just go to a market and pick up a charm? Like, is there like a black market for charms?
There should be. Izzie can do them, but it just, one, it comes at a cost, so it's much easier and less likely to burn you out if you're practicing magic in your affinity, and two, you're just not as good at it.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. Nobody can be good at everything.
Yeah, and there's got to be checks and balances on power.
Yes, that makes it definitely a lot more fun when there are checks and balances, because, otherwise it's, I mean, I guess you can do like the overpowered hero, but it's hard to do it well so that it's not boring, because if they have all this power, if they're when somebody is overpowered, like making it so that there's actual stakes and that there's that there's any sort of struggle for them can be sort of hard.
Yeah, you have to make it kind of Gary Sue or Mary Sue concept people talk about, and I agree. Like, if there's no struggle,
yeah. But like most people like consider Mary Sue or whatever, like a lot of what people talk about Mary Sue is completely not what a Mary Sue is. Like, some people will call any woman character who's like doing anything other than being the girlfriend, if she's the main character, she's a Mary Sue. And it's like, no, that's not a Mary Sue. Just because she's a main character and she's a badass, like, you can do that. Look at K-pop Demon Hunters. They are badasses. They are not Mary Sues.
That is true.
Like
Superman essentially is kind of like a Mary Sue, like just has every single power in the world and is indestructible except kryptonite, which is I actually did enjoy the new Superman movie, so I did like that take on it.
I mean, he is a Gary Sue, but he often, when they do it right and put him in situations where where like it's like gray decisions and like he can, like, that's a thing where he'd be at a disadvantage, because he's everything is black and white for him. Like, it's good or it's evil. So if you're in a situation where there's lots of shades of gray, he has a lot of difficulty with that. If he's done right, he should have a lot of difficulty with that and not know what to do and be really out of his element, like fish out of water kind of thing. That's the right way to do a character like that. I have a character who is very good, very moral, very kind. And so I constantly throw him in he gets constantly in these situations where it's not clear what is good, who is evil, and what even to do. And he doesn't like to harm people. So he's constantly trying to figure out, like, what is the least harm? Like, what should I be doing? And he might just default to, like, I'll just throw a shield over everything until I figure out what the right course of action is.
Fair.
And because those situations are hard for people who are very good and moral, who have a very strong set of morality. He also has a son who's usually with him, who's like, wants him to do cool magical stuff, and he's like, we can't do that if it will harm people.
Yes, and you should have characters in a full spectrum. Like, you have your good and your evil, and then you have the people who maybe you never know what to expect from them. They're the wild card that are just going to make a decision purely because for money or for what they're feeling at the moment.
Yeah, and that makes it good, and But he's just very aware of how much magic he has and that he could do serious harm if he's not careful. So that like makes him extra cautious about things. And I think that in a way undercuts, like, if you have all this power, but you're afraid to use it because you don't want to hurt people, you don't want to make things worse, and you're not an educated person, you have been very sheltered, that there's a lot you don't know, so you hold back. Like, I think that's one way to negate having too much power.
Yes, absolutely.
But there's other ways. And we're getting close to an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. So,
yes, sure.
Any last words you want to say about Midwizardry, Maternal Magic, the Midwizard of Cosconia. Did I get it right?
Yes, Cosconia.
Yay. Or anything else we've been talking about? Because we kind of ranged quite widely.
Yeah, we kind of went all over the place, but at the very least, I think if you pick up the Midwizard of Cosconia, it's going to be the most unique book you read this year. And that is pretty consistently what every beta reader and advanced reader told me. And it's had exceptionally good feedback so far. And it explores a concept that you probably haven't explored a lot of in fantasy worlds, but you have seen a lot of in real life. And it tackles topics that I hope will bring to the forefront that we don't always talk about. And so I hope this can start a conversation and maybe start a whole movement of including more accurate representations of women's health and fantasy.
You know, you could actually write up a supplement to it with how to start that conversation. That might be something you want to take offline and think about, because you're interesting. Because it'd be great for people to start talking about this, but they might need help, like a framework, like questions or prompts, and you are perfectly placed to be able to put that guide together to help people start that conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I am going to take that offline and think about that a little bit. And that's something I would need to involve a lot of my female colleagues and patients and friends and family in those conversations to be how would you want this brought up to you in this situation? So I would gather some market research there.
Yeah, no, and I think that could be a really cool thing to involve your community in. And also what might be great to add to the books at some point is I think people struggle when they go to a doctor not knowing how they should talk about things or what things they should bring up. And I've never seen anywhere any sort of guidance on that. Recently my sister-in-law was not well, and she went to the ER, she went to the doctor, and she's having all different symptoms, and trying to make sure that you speak the right ones to get the right care, because doctors can only help you if you tell them the right things.
That's so true.
So I think especially since you're a teaching doctor, some kind of something some short thing or that to give people that guidance, because especially women, we're not heard. We don't know how to advocate. What are the things that if we're feeling we should make sure to get in front of the doctor, and if they're not hearing us, find somebody else, that sort of thing. That might be, you could even phrase it as Izzie's advice or something. You could take a fun spin on that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Because then Izzie, because you've talked about how you want this book to have an impact, then Izzie could help in the real world, and I think that could be really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. Let me see if I can do something like that, or even insert it directly into book 2 as kind of a way that she helps patients along.
Yeah, you could put a little note, there's been a lot of questions and things, and Izzie's, can't help everyone, but so she's working with me to put together something to help you speak to doctors, because it helps doctors too if patients are able to articulate what's going on in a way that they can help them, because all doctors, even if they're burnt out and overworked, they still want to help people. They don't want people to walk away suffering.
Yeah. And, just off the top of my head, just if you were able to go into a doctor's visit and say, this is the symptom I've been experiencing, this is how long I've been having it, this is what I've tried already, this is what makes it better, this is what makes it worse. And if you go in and you can, spend a smaller amount of time getting your thoughts together, then you have more amount of time to talk about the problem and explore it together. And that's probably something people don't think about necessarily before they go in and see the doctor.
Yes. Yeah. Because I don't think people understand why. I didn't until you said, I didn't know that you were limited to 15 minutes. And I don't think anybody knows that, and how we can make the most of that so we both get a benefit. Because at the end of the day, everybody goes into medicine because they want to help people. So if we can help you to help us, I think that we can make the broken system a little bit better, a little less broken.
Yes, agreed.
All right, cool.
Well, it was so great chatting with you. I appreciate you having me on the show. This was super fun to talk about.
Sure. You can come back for the next book, always welcome. Open policy. Should hopefully have more time. We're closing out the estate for my father. So because it'll be 1 year on Sunday tomorrow. That since
gotcha. Yep.
Yeah. So I should have a little more time. Yeah. So I'm sorry you had to. We were playing email hockey back and forth. I mean, no, it was on Instagram. That's right. It was Instagram. Yeah. So, yeah. But now you have my email, so we can make this more easily connect.
Yes. Perfect.
Cool. And you said the second book, does it have a title yet?
It has it in my head, but it's not been announced yet.
Okay, we won't say that. So we'll look for the next book in spring of 2026, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming
99 cents on Amazon, so check it out.
Yes, I've got the links in the show notes in the description. I just pre-ordered it myself because it sounds like such an interesting book. So I can't wait to dig into that. Izzie sounds like a really cool character. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when I'll get to read it because things are a little bit nuts with my current situation. But
yes, completely
it's
fair.
on. Yeah, hopefully, I'm hoping over the holidays, the Christmas holidays, I'll get to read it. I don't know if before then. There's just a slew of things.
Yes, that'd be a great time for it.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming on the podcast. And I've been your host, Melinda Kucsera, and we had Zack Schoppen, and we talked about the Midwizard of Cosconia. Yeah, so go check it out and have a great day or great night wherever you are.